This is a short video on why STEM worker shortage claims seem plausible. STEM is an acronym for science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. It refers to scientists, engineers, and mostly it is used as a reference to programmers, software engineers, computer scientists today. So most discussions of STEM worker shortage claims, although they exist in other fields, primarily apply to computer programming. There are pervasive claims dating back at least to the late 1940s of STEM worker shortages in the United States. It's perennial, it's a crisis. So STEM worker shortage claim is a claim that there's a desperate, dire shortage of STEM workers, scientists, engineers, especially software engineers, programmers today. That companies are starving, they can't find employees, the country is in danger because we don't have enough of these valuable employees who are hard to find. This is what's claimed. These claims are, for the most part, erroneous, baseless, false. There may be some specialized cases of certain specific specialties where they're temporarily true, but they're mostly false. We can most easily see that from some education statistics, such as the number of students taking and passing the advanced placement calculus exams in the United States. There are many other ways to see that this is true, but these numbers are very high, and they've been growing by 6 to 7% per year, well ahead of the population growth rate. In fact, all the way back to the 1970s. In 2016, 280,000 students in high schools in the United States took and passed the AP Calculus exams, either the AB, which is the easier one, and the BC Calculus exam, which is comparable to a full year of calculus, a first year calculus course at a top university. This is a huge number. This is a key requirement for all sorts of engineering, programming, etc. Today, most of the students that take and pass the exam are already programming and have been for a couple of years. If not, they will almost certainly pick it up subsequently in coursework in college and also in their jobs, because almost every STEM field now involves computer programming. So the point is, we actually produce a lot of these people. And in fact, if you project this 280,000 a year forward 10 years, it means in 10 years, 2.8 million STEM students will be produced, not counting the people who take these courses later in college or universities. The bottom line is these claims are mostly false, but nonetheless they're very widely repeated, and people believe them. Many, many people believe them, including STEM workers themselves. So why is that? Why is something which is so actually clearly false so widely believed? Well, I think the single biggest reason is it seems plausible is because people who have an interest and aptitude in STEM topics, especially mathematics, but computer programming, lots of different fields that are sort of grouped together under the STEM acronym, seem to be relatively rare. They make up somewhere between maybe 0 and 5% of a typical school population, a high school or so forth. The situation that most of us encounter is very much like what's depicted in the fictional Stranger Things series set in the 1980s, which is centered on 4 kind of nerdy kids who are into Dungeons and Dragons and radios and computers and that kind of stuff, and they're a tiny minority in their school. They get picked on, all of that kind of stuff, and that's what people see. It's what they experience. It's what most sort of nerds experience in the United States. Even if you attend a specialized school like the Bronx High School of Science in New York City, where actually most of the kids are similar, these are special magnet schools, or in other ways, they're clearly atypical of the country. Therefore, the idea that there's a shortage of such people isn't unexpected. In fact, it sort of matches your everyday experience. The problem with this, of course, is nerds, if you will, or people who are prone to be interested in and good at these fields, are, it's true, at least so far, only a few percent of the population. But the question is, how many jobs actually are there for example, software engineers or other kinds of STEM professions? Many fields, like physics, which is what my training is actually in, there aren't a lot of jobs at all. Now, software for the last maybe couple decades is different, and actually there are more jobs than there are people getting bachelor's degrees in computer science. And what happens is people with degrees in other STEM fields are going into computer science because they can't find jobs in their field. And so the correct thing to look at is, for example, the number of people taking and passing AP Calculus, because that gives us a much better estimate of how many people there are out there who qualify for these jobs. So the point is, yes, it's not a huge number of people, at least with the current educational system, culture, etc. But there aren't a lot of these jobs. Different estimates estimate somewhere in the range of maybe 5 to 7 million jobs that could be characterized as computer programming jobs or STEM jobs or whatever in the United States. So something in the range of about 5 million students since 1970 have taken and passed AP Calculus, which is nearly enough to fill those jobs. It doesn't include people who take and pass the courses later in college and universities, and it doesn't include a lot of immigrants or people here on these visa programs like H-1B visa. So the point of all this is actually there's plenty of people, but the everyday experience of most people growing up, including people who attend places like the Bronx High School of Science or go to places like MIT or Caltech or Carnegie Mellon, is that they're rare. They're just a few percent of the population. However, the jobs are just a few percent of the jobs. So this is the single biggest reason that these claims persist and why people believe them. They don't take a close look at the actual numbers and realize that there are actually lots of these, lots of nerds out there relative to the job market. Secondly, there's tremendous propaganda, as I said, dating back actually to the late 1940s, that there is in fact a desperate shortage. And this is one of examples of this, which is the What Most Schools Don't Teach video from code.org, which got 14 million views back in 2013. And it promotes the idea of a shortage. It includes a segment with Mark Zuckerberg claiming that Facebook can't find qualified people and they'll hire them as soon as they run into them. Basically, you just walk in, you're warm, you're breathing, you can program, whatever that means, and they'll hire you. And numerous companies, numerous CEOs of companies, Bill Gates appears here too, either claim this explicitly or strongly imply it. So it's very, very heavily promoted. It's constant repetition. So everyday experience seems to match this. It's heavily promoted by business. And there's a political aspect to it. It's actually promoted. This idea that there is a shortage is promoted by politicians across the political spectrum, both Republicans and Democrats, very heavily. It's not a uniquely Republican thing. You can find the same claims in the New York Times and in the Wall Street Journal and many other sources, ranging from places that are considered very liberal to very conservative. Now, there's criticism across the political spectrum, but it doesn't get a lot of press. Americans perceive their two parties to be polarized, and that's been claimed for a long time, and it is, according to polls and so forth, gone up. There's a great deal of polarization between Republicans and Democrats. What this means, though, is if the Republicans and Democrats appear to agree on something, the feeling is, well, it must be true, right? They wouldn't get together and claim something false, and the evidence must be so strong that both parties agree. Therefore, somewhat paradoxically, this high level of polarization or perceived polarization, that these parties are very different, lends a lot of credibility to the claims by the politicians that it's true. If the Republicans and Democrats both agree this is a problem, the Republicans and Democrats both promote the same policies, they both support, for example, these different visa programs to make up for the shortage, like H-1B, and there's a whole bunch of others. If they both want to support education for programming and for various STEM topics, then of course it must be real. Why would they? I mean, they're supposed to be at each other's throats, right? So the political polarization is actually one of the reasons for the political promotion of this by both parties combines to make it seem very credible. Finally, we have a belief that we have a free press enshrined in the Bill of Rights. It says Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof or abridging the freedom of speech or of the press or the right of the people peaceably to assemble and to petition the government for a redress of grievances. And when we talk a lot about having a free press, so the perception that we have a free press, we don't have the kind of press that the former Soviet Union had, or Nazi Germany, or many other places in the world, the perception of that the press is free means that when there's widespread agreement in the press, which there is, promoting the idea that there is this shortage of STEM workers, of programmers and software engineers in particular today, again, we're sort of conditioned to believe it must be true, that we can trust the press. But in fact, in this instance, these claims are not true. So the basic point is there's good reason, especially just the rarity that people observe in their everyday life in high school, particularly in colleges, in our educational system, of people who have an interest and aptitude for these areas, leads to a strong credibility that people will believe these claims even though they're actually not true. So this video was produced on January 1st, 2020. If you like the video, please click like. If you have any comments or feedback, we'd love to hear from you. Finally, if you'd like to support our work, we have a Patreon page and you can donate there if you'd like to. This concludes this video.